Well, hello. How's it going, guys? This is Ali from the AI Enthusiast, and we're going to continue where we left off. We talked about ANI, artificial narrow intelligence. We talked about artificial general intelligence, AGI. We defined artificial intelligence. So much AI, right? But now we're actually going to talk about some of the building blocks, and we're going to use an example driven approach because that's how I learn best. And I think, at least from my experience teaching folks, this is the best way or one of the better ways of teaching folks instead of giving them abstract ideas. There have been other types of artificial intelligence in the past, but, and even there right now, contemporary systems. But one of the key things that when we talk about AI and like the significant improvements we've made recently, we're talking about in particular machine learning, the ability to learn from data, to come up with statistics and understand the patterns, et cetera, et cetera. So a common example of intelligence, guys, is classifying things, right? So right now we're going to be classifying images. The task is to identify what the animal is, right? And the cool thing here you'll see is like, okay, I know these two are bears, right? And then I know that this is a koala. Now, you might ask, okay, well, Ali, this is common sense, but like what I'm saying is, guys, like this is intelligence, right? What I'm doing here, I'm saying, look, the fur, the texture of the fur might be a little bit different. If I was observing these creatures in real life, the bears are massive, right? They're very big, right? Koala is not so much, from my understanding. You can also see the difference in the nose, right? Furthermore, you can look at their paws or paws. You can see the differences there. There's so many different things, right? Different qualities and characteristics about these animals that help us classify them differently. Right? And that's actually what scientists have been doing for a long time. But this idea of like actually classifying, you have to first find out the patterns, right? This has certain things we can look at. We can look at eyes, the distance of the eyes. We can look at the nose. We can look at some facial features. And these are all patterns that you find. And so these patterns help you classify an image. So that is essentially what we do as human beings, right? So then, I'm going to now talk about like kind of coming up with this whole scenario from a computing perspective. So let's move on to the next slide. So let's talk about some more definitions. We'll talk about code, aka software, basically, or aka a program, right? You know how we talk to human beings and we we talk to humans in English or Spanish or whatever language, right? Well, likewise, we have to talk to computers. When we're talking to computers, we're going to talk in their language. And there are many different languages I've listed here. The list is large, but of course you've got Python, which is another language. I will be covering the tutorials that I'm going to be covering in. Actually, I've already started a series on teaching folks about Python. You can check that out. But essentially, at a high level, your software or your code or your program, what you do is you choose your language. What language do you want to talk to the computer in? Step 2, you write a simple text file with instructions. Basically, the instructions are written in that language. And then you tell the computer to run the instructions. And then it does what you want it to do. And that's literally what software is, guys. Actually, here's a picture of some software. This is some code taken from PyTorch's open source repository. I just said a bunch of confusing words, not to worry. Basically, this is some code I found online, and it is written in Python. So this Python code, you can see, it's just a file. It's got text in it. It looks like English. Some of it is actually English, but it's like another language. And this is what the computer understands, right? So when you want the computer to do something, you're going to talk to it in in Python, right? And that's pretty much it, guys. Now, if you look at examples, so an ad blocker, when you're telling the computer to block ads, right? Somebody wrote some code. They wrote some Python or really JavaScript, whatever the language is. They wrote some instructions to tell the computer to block ads. LinkedIn, right? LinkedIn, the whole website. You actually go to the website on your computer. Your computer makes basically a request for information, and it basically talks to the computers that LinkedIn has. And the LinkedIn computers will give you your social network. And essentially, guys, everything on a computer is written with code. So then what is an algorithm, guys? Well, an algorithm is essentially a recipe. So I really want you to take this recipe analogy and run with this. So you have an algorithm, it has ingredients, that's your input data. And then you have the cooking instructions, right? With any recipe. That is really like how you're going to process your ingredients, how you're going to process your input data, and then you're going to get your output. And that's, basically, how do you write this algorithm? How do you write this recipe? Well, you write it in code. You write it in a programming language. So our language, as mentioned, we're going to use Python. So you can see over here on the left-hand side, we have a recipe. Ingredients, they're listed in English. Preparation, the instructions are in English. Likewise, we got ourselves a recipe on the right-hand side right here, and it's written in Python. So what is this doing? It's the recipe for telling the computer to say something 5 times. So the input data, that's the ingredient. Hello, that's the message. And then the recipe, this is a very short recipe. It's only 1 line of code. And remember, this language I'm using is Python. I'm just printing it 5 times. And then this is the output, guys. This is what the computer did. So I told the computer what to do. I gave it an algorithm. I gave it a recipe. It's just a list of instructions. And, I specified the instructions, not in English, in Python. So to tell humans what to do, ask them what to do, you use English. And then to tell the computer what to do, you're going to use code. You're going to use a specific programming language. And that's all it is, guys. That's all software is. And this is an algorithm for printing something 5 times. It's just a list of steps that you follow, a recipe. So then, guys, let's talk about delicious ingredients, right? Let's talk about the input data. So we had input data of hello here. The data could be anything, guys. The data could be, text data. It could be images. So we were talking about, koalas versus bears, right? So you could have images. You could have audio data, audio files. You could have even like your Excel data on the bottom right. So anything can be really data, and you can learn patterns from just about anything, assuming there is some sort of pattern to be learned. But yes, that is data for you. Then finally, you got, almost finally for this video, we're almost there, guys. You have the model, right? So this is specifically the recipe. Looking at this box right here, you got the data. We just talked about the data. And then you have the recipe. This is going to learn the patterns. And then finally, the output, the computer has learned some patterns, right? So, essentially you have the ingredients, you have the data, and then you've learned the patterns from the ingredients. And what is this? This is essentially just an algorithm, guys. It's just a recipe. So model is a recipe. It's basically a recipe specifically to learn patterns from data. So remember how we had algorithm, guys? This algorithm isn't learning any pattern from data. This recipe is not learning any pattern from data. It's just printing the data to the screen. So it's an algorithm. It's a series of steps. Well, if the series of steps are telling you to learn some sort of patterns, if those steps are that specific and they're saying, hey, look, here's your data, learn some patterns from it, then that pattern, that algorithm, that list of steps, right? That algorithm, that recipe, you could also say it's a model. So a model is going to be learning patterns from the data. That's how I want you to think about it. So over here, for our purposes, a model is a recipe, and the recipe is basically what it's doing is it's learning from the data. And so a model or algorithm, we're going to use those terms interchangeably. Okay, so that's kind of what I want to say model. It's just a way to learn from data. It's a recipe. And remember, recipes are specified in English for humans or any other language, Spanish, whatever, Chinese. But for computers, you're going to have to use computer languages, and we're using Python. So then, guys, we're actually at the last slide for this video. Now look at this, right? So we went through, we had our data, we had our recipe for learning patterns. 3 is the output, right? On the blue here, you have computer has learned patterns, which is all, it's Gucci, it's awesome. So now what does that output state look like? So essentially you have the output of your recipe, your algorithm, your model. It's a trained model. The computer has learned the patterns, right? And this model can then be deployed. So deployed to different machines, different computers. Remember, it is a model. A model is an algorithm, right? It's a recipe. And recipes you use, it's just a text file. It's just some code, some Python programming code. It's just a recipe. And you can have machines now, they have when it learned the patterns of the data, now what you can do is you can deploy it as software, right? So now, guys, you're going to take the images of the polar bear, the koala, the grizzly bear, anything like snakes, cats, etc., etc. You're going to feed them in to our friend here. So he's like, I got this now, no worries. And he's learned the patterns. So he's going to classify for us. He's going to say the first one's a polar bear, the second one's a koala. koala, third one's grizzly bear, ... So I just kind of showed you when we were talking about how humans are doing this, we're classifying things. We kind of broke it down on, from a computing perspective, how do computers learn this? And I gave some terms about, what is an algorithm, what is a model, what is code, and what does the output look like? And, this secret recipe, learning patterns from the data in this yellow box, that is, the technical side of it. Different types of models learn patterns differently. And so we'll continue this series in the next video. But for now, thanks again, guys. Hopefully you enjoyed the video. Hopefully you're starting to understand what it is. And yeah, if you can, please like and subscribe. Anyways, have a good one and take care.